Hello. Wow, that's really loud. I'm gonna sit here. Is that cool?
Yeah, I'll put this.
What? Hi, I'm Bree Haler, and I'm the Associate Campus Minister at St. Paul's, working closely with Father Stan. So I guess really doesn't, you are really far back there now that I'm in this perspective. So, being Catholic at IU, I obviously don't know every way that it's possible to be Catholic at IU. I only know the way that I've lived and gone through on my own. So I'll share a little bit with you my story. When I was a freshman, oh, there he is.
Oh.
When I was a freshman at IU, I had left high school, thinking that life was just wonderful. I was involved in almost everything, and the important thing was that reflecting back on it, I felt like I was known, I was accepted. So to come to this huge university after going to a private Catholic high school for 4 years, I was shell-shocked. I had gone to Catholic school from kindergarten through 12th grade, and religion was always a part of my life, but it was never something I had to go and reach out and find on my own. It was built into my day. We prayed before every class, and we went on retreats. I did service projects with my cheerleading squad, like things that at a public high school or public school you don't necessarily do, or some might do that. Someone else's Band-Aids on my shoe. Yeah. My thoughts exactly. And I'm distracted so easily.
High school prayer.
High school
prayer. Reaching out for faith.
Yes, thank you. And so I came to IU, and it didn't even dawn on me that, oh yes, this is something I should look for. I should immediately seek out a place to where I can practice my faith, meet people who share it. Instead, I kind of came in with the approach of knowing that not everybody thought Catholics were great. Some people didn't really like them, didn't respond well to them. So I approached it with the fear of, well, if I'm going to make friends, if I'm going to be accepted here, I need to downplay my faith so that nobody really knows, even though it was like super important to my life and always had been. And so I would downplay how important my faith was to me. I'd go to church on Sundays, and on days that I was busy or had something else better to do, or didn't feel like walking from 3rd Street to 17th Street, I just didn't do it. And I began to develop this huge hole, and I couldn't even name that that's what was missing to begin with. But I wasn't happy. I wasn't making friends that I thought shared my values. And so the whole reason for not going after my faith or sort of seeking that out was because I wanted to be accepted. And it still wasn't happening. So then recruitment happened for the Greek community, and I went through that process. And I don't know at one point during that process where at the end you have to be in a sorority, you have to list your top 3 that you are interested in. And so I kept thinking, oh my gosh, how am I going to choose between these 3? This is like for the next 3 years of my life. And never did it dawn on me that you don't have to choose any of them. There's a 4th option. You don't have to be in the Greek system. But I ended up going in and living in a sorority here at IU, and there were some great parts of it, and I grew a lot from that experience. And looking back, see ways that I wouldn't be who I was today had I not had that experience. But was it the most supportive community for me? No, not at all. I didn't feel home, I guess, at IU until I went on the Kairos retreat, which is coming up in February, and you should all go. I didn't feel at home in my own skin or in my own personhood until I went on this retreat my sophomore year. And from that time on, I was like on fire for life and found a home at St. Paul's. That was really life-saving, because if I had continued down the same path of not feeling like I had real friends, not feeling like I was being my authentic self, and not feeling like I had an outlet to be that self, I could have seen college being extremely different than it turned out being. So, being Catholic at IU, it can be a challenge because there's so much on this campus, and really in life in general, that opposes our faith and the values that we have because of that faith. And we're challenged on a daily basis, sometimes in subtle ways, sometimes in very overt ways. I remember one time I was in my literary analysis class, and we were studying Hamlet, and the teacher had asked a question, something along the lines of, well, what kind of faith do you think that the people in this play were practicing? And one of the students in class raised their hand, and she was like, well, obviously Catholicism. And the professor was like, well, why is it so obvious? Well, because of all the superstitions. And I was just like, what? This is really happening? And it's really in those moments that I feel like we're called. We all have a big vocation. Sometimes it's religious vocation, sometimes it's vocation to marriage, to single life. Sometimes we are called to specific lines of work. But there's also small vocations, moments like that where our faith is challenged, and there is a response to those challenges, but it's hard to know what the right response is. To think about, like, okay, well, this makes me angry, and then think, well, Jesus wasn't just mad at people all the time, and he was loving, and all those things, and you have all those thoughts going through your head, or at least maybe that's just me. But then you have so little time to actually make that response. And I don't know if you guys are like this, but I can always think of the perfect thing to respond like 12 hours later, or maybe even 5 minutes later, when it's like, oh, they're gone. So there goes that chance. So I think the point of sharing that is that we don't know everything about anything, about the world. We also don't know everything about our faith. And I think so many times people are silenced from asking questions, or feel like, oh, well, if I ask a question about my faith, then people are going to think I'm doubting it, or that I'm not a good Catholic. But questions are okay to ask, and St. Paul's and this community right here is a safe place to ask those questions. We're rational beings. We ask questions. We are in an intellectual environment where questions, I mean, if you don't ask a single question through your college career, you must be brilliant, far beyond anybody I've ever met. But yeah, we don't know everything. So asking questions is not only an okay thing, but I would say it's an encouraged thing, because we're never going to find the answers we're looking for unless we do ask those questions. And I think too that something that is important for us all to remember is that there's more than one way of living out your Catholic faith. I think sometimes we can get comfortable in a particular way of doing it, and it's not necessarily a bad way of living our faith, but it can constrict us from growing in ways that maybe God wants us to grow. And I think that God made all of us individuals unique. There's no one in this world that's like each and every one of you. And for each unique person that he has made, there's a completely different way that he communicates. We all receive messages from God differently from the person sitting next to us, different from the person sitting in front of us, behind us, and from people that couldn't join us tonight. So if God speaks to us all on our own level and so in ways that we can hear, then it must be also true that we all respond differently to God. So our prayer lives all look different than the people who are around us or anybody else who's Catholic. And so I think that's also a challenge in our faith because only we know our relationship with God, and only we know, and God knows what's in our hearts as far as that relationship goes. And so sometimes it's hard to communicate our our faith to other people because of that. But point being, I mean, each of us experience God in different ways, and so we each respond to God in different ways. Now, as far as the challenges of being Catholic in an extremely secular environment where partying and drinking and getting wasted and all those other lovely activities that people seem to use to fill their time on campus, it's sometimes really difficult to go against that, and it's easy to feel like we're in the minority or that we're the only person who maybe doesn't want to go out and drink ourselves stupid, or I feel like I'm focusing on drinking, but there's other things that keep us from, that make it a challenge for us to live out our faith. Especially when it seems like, well, I don't know, I felt this way when I was a freshman, like, I didn't really want to go out and drink and party all the time, but I also had this feeling of, well, how am I going to make friends? How am I going to be accepted? Will they think I'm judging them if I'm not joining in? And I don't know, maybe I don't think I'm the only one who feels that way, but there's more people out there who do. Excuse me. But if you are feeling that way, you're not the only one. And college is an opportunity for us to not only continue finding ourselves and to be ourselves, and it's a great time to do that, but it's also one of the most difficult times to do that because of all the pressures that are out there. And it's easy to say, oh, well, I'm myself and I'm going to be myself. But when it comes down to it, the pressures are so subtle, sometimes we've already fallen into them before we can even realize that we have. And it's not until looking back afterward that we're like, that was totally not me. Or how did I get caught up in this? I mean, I think that's probably the way it was for me in the Greek system. I think I enjoyed it in the beginning because one of the first activities they have us do is you sing. Is anybody familiar with that? It's basically any student organization can be a part of it, but it's a majority Greek houses who participate. And it's basically, the way the Greeks do it is they pair up a sorority and a fraternity and they put on like a 6-minute musical. Well, I did musical theater all through high school, so of course it was like right up my alley. And I think I confused the excitement and all the fun and bonding with the girls I'd met and got wrapped up in that part of it that was feeding me, that I wasn't really thinking about making a clear decision. And I'm not saying that the Greek system is all bad. I'm not here to tell you tonight, don't go Greek, because there are really positive things that can come out of it. The point of me sharing it is that it wasn't a place for me where I was encouraged to be my authentic self. And until I found that in St. Paul's, I didn't know it existed. So if anybody out there is feeling like, oh man, I really just want to settle in somewhere and feel like I can go a place where I'm myself, just trust that it exists. And even if you're not as in love with St. Paul's as I was by the time I graduated, there are places where you can go and be yourself. I don't know that I kind of do better with questions. Does anybody have any questions they want to ask? Do you have any pointers you want me to add?
I just want to say, how did you wind up going on that Cowboys retreat?
Oh, you already know the answer to this. We placed it in the audience.
Which is why I thought.
Oh, yes.
That's the Greek.
And this is also why I'm mentioning the Greek system, or meeting in the Greek system was important. There was a senior in my house that went to St. Paul's, was very involved, was actually the rector of the Kairos retreat that I went on. And going on this retreat was really not all that informed of a decision. She lived in what we call the fishbowl, one of the fishbowl rooms in the house. It's basically like you have all these 3 floors of rooms that you share with people, but there's singles in between each floor, and it's a fishbowl because everybody walks by your room all the time. So it's like you're a fish. But she had a bulletin board on the outside of her door with flyers for Kairos on there. And I think it was like the day before the retreat was going to happen. I just yanked it off, filled it out, showed up to St. Paul's on the day of the retreat with my money and just went on a whim. But looking back, it certainly wasn't a whim. I really feel like God was calling me to be there. And I mean, since that retreat, my life has been enriched in ways, in so many ways, and I met so many great people that I can't even count on my 5 fingers. One hand would be a better way of saying it. And after that, I was, like I said, on fire with life, but especially about my faith, and continued the next year to be a leader on that retreat. And then my senior year, one of the co-rectors for the retreat. And since then, went on to be the campus ministry intern when I was an undergrad. Really felt a call to do ministry professionally. So went on to do the ECHO program, get my master's in theology, and St. Paul's took me back, and they even pay me to show up now. So, but yeah, it's amazing how one event or one decision that wasn't even really informed can shape your life forever and set you in a path that can be really positive and can help you to become your best self. But one decision can also similarly send you down a path that you don't necessarily want to go. But if that's already happened, there's still hope. Once you're on, if you're not on the right path for a certain time, it doesn't mean you can't get back on it. Any other questions? Yes.
Are there any other really important moments, you think, in your experiences at IU that really defined or kind of clarified the importance of staying close with your faith?
Yeah, there were actually several incidences that I would just get, they seemed like minor actions that my friends would do, and I would get so offended by it, and I never knew why. And I actually had a spiritual director last year that kind of made me make sense of all of it. She said, usually the people that upset us the most, it's because they are stepping on a value that we hold near and dear to ourselves. And that made it make sense to me. Like, I would get so upset over these things because I had valued what they were dismissing so much. So those reminders, and even now, I mean, I had a friend recently who got married, but she had already been living with her fiance for a year or so, and my sister sincerely was asking her. My sister's also recently a newlywed, well, year and a half, not year and a half, just a little over a year. And so she was very genuinely asking this friend, so what are you most excited about being married? And another friend that was in the car cracked some joke about, oh, I bet she's really excited to have sex for the first time or something, and just sort of made a mockery out of saving yourself for marriage. And I don't think that people make those kind of comments to be hurtful, but sometimes it's a reminder, like, yeah, it's a downer when someone directly knocks the value that you have, or something that is really hard to do and it's just dismissed so easily. But it's also a reminder that it is important, I guess, if that makes sense. So it's not really been another, one moment, but a lot of little moments of challenges that, while they seem to be defeating you, they actually have made me stronger in my faith. Julie?
After you went on Kairos, what other things helped you, as you said, be your best self?
Helped me be my best self. The people that I had encountered there, it helped me feel like for the first time, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one. I have this support of people who share my values and share my faith, and doing those things really helped hold me accountable, because when I was going to Mass after that, I knew people there, and if I had missed Mass after that, people would say, hey, where were you? We missed you. And so it's a whole other level of accountability when you have a community that's holding you to those values, that shares them. So I think that's a big one. But also, and I don't know if anybody, if this is true for anybody else, I had no idea what Eucharistic adoration was until that Kairos retreat. And so even when I was doing it, I was like, what are we doing? What's in that cross? Like, what's going on? And I've only, I wouldn't say that it's something I do every day anymore, but that was a big moment on the Big Moment retreat, where my eyes were open to different ways of relating to God and increasing my relationship with Jesus. Does that answer your question? Patrick?
Would it have been wrong that the journal said, well, clearly Catholicism, in which you wrote on Hamlet, to Saint Nick her in the face?
Yes.
Okay.
It's not quite the response, I think, that would increase our argument for Catholicism. Yes.
So you touched on, like, for me personally, it's not hard if I make initially, there's more I have issues with the professors themselves. Like, how do you deal with that? Like, especially right now, I'm like a scientific contributions class around evolution right now, and everybody's just like totally bashing like Christianity. And like, I feel like I shouldn't even say anything in that class. And I feel like I'm gonna like use points for like not participating in like you do the work. It's just it doesn't come easy.
Yeah, I don't know that I have an answer for that, but that is a good example of a challenge, that it's not even just our peers or classmates who are going to challenge us, but academics in general, especially if you're in science, the sciences, because, this is a liberal campus as far as intellectual thought goes, and that's a challenging one. I don't know, Father Stammer, do you have a response to that?
There's a tendency to pit religion against science when they address two very different questions about life. Religion asks the question, why? Science asks the question, how? I think that science is more threatened by religion because it looks deeper into the meaning of our physical world, whereas science looks at the surface. And that threat is what makes us a target so often, unfortunately.
And I just think back to, like, every time my faith is challenged or somebody makes a negative comment and I get into this, oh, woe is me, sort of attitude, I'm like, well, wait a minute. If they did that to Christ, if they crucified Jesus for living his faith, then why would they not do that to his followers too? So, I don't know if that's helpful. Yes?
Just to help her, as a philosophy and religious studies major, like I get challenged a lot in a lot of different ways. And your professors actually enjoy it if you do challenge them back in a very obviously respectful but informed way. In some ways, they'll actually gain more respect for you than people who just agree with them and sort of just reiterate the same points over and over again in class. So I've noticed a lot of my closest relationships with professors are professors who hold opposite beliefs that I do, and we sort of have a dialogue about it, and then we develop like a relationship out of that. So, don't lose hope and don't be afraid to sort of just kind of be like, well, you see, this isn't the whole story. Like, let's see if we can talk about this a little more. So.
become a no